Wisdom of Grief podcast, where we explore all aspects of the journey of loss and rediscovering joy. I'm your host, Leslie Palumbo, and today we are talking about living grief when you lose someone who is still in a living body and how to stay sane during that with my guest, Cali Bird. So
Hey.
just briefly, what is living grief? I think of it as unfinished grief, and anyone who is in it knows what it's like to be in the room with somebody who is in the living body of your beloved, but with a very different mind or personality. And some examples of living grief would be living with or loving or caring for someone with Alzheimer's or post-stroke, cancer, dementia, or an accident. And today we have our wonderful guest, Cali Bird, who's going to help us with some of this and talk about
Yeah.
her own experience. And Cali is an author and writer on the topic of self-love, gentleness, and resilience. And she has a Substack currently called The Gentle Creative, which I will link to in the show notes.
Thank you.
And Cali, I am so happy to be talking with you. And I just welcome you here today.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on, Leslie. It's lovely. And I look forward to what we're going to get into over the next
Yeah, well, you're
hour.
so brave and courageous to be writing and talking about this. And I know how helpful it is to me, who's had some lived experience with living grief as well. And to hear you put it into words is so beautiful. And I wonder if you might just be able to introduce yourself briefly, and then also, if you're willing, to share the story of how you came to be in living grief.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Cali Bird. I live in the UK. You might be able to tell from the accent. I'm about 40 miles north of London. I used to live in central London, but I'm in what I call the Shires. Bedfordshire is the county where I live, and it's commuter distance to London. I'm 59. Will be 60 soon. Kind of semi-retired. I've come through long COVID, which is where my gentleness comes from, and sort of self-love and being kind. I've had to relearn a lot of lessons from how I used to live. I used to be very productivity, push through, get it all done. And I burnt myself out over a number of years, and I'm now in recovery from that and living very differently in terms of my mindset. And then sort of as, a year or so into that journey, is when my husband, Graham, we had met later in life. So we met when we were 40. We were at school together. We knew each other at school. We weren't mates, but we sort of reunited through various school reunions and got together romantically when we were 40 and married when we were 46. And 2.5 years ago, so we were 57. Because we were in the same school year, we're the same age. We were coming home from London one night. We'd been out for dinner and we'd got the train home, and it was about 10:20 at night. It's one of those stations where you go up a set of staircases, over the bridge, across the tracks, and down another set of staircase, down and out through the station entrance. And on the way down those steps, Graham, we were about a third of the way from the top, so quite high on that staircase. I don't know what happened. Graham lost his footing. And it's, sometimes when you I don't know, knock a cup over, you kind of see it happen before it happens. And before I knew it, he was careering down the staircase. And he just landed at the bottom. And my first thought as I'm like running down to catch up with him was, oh my God, he's going to be so angry about this. He'll be so annoyed that he's, done this. But then as I got there, I could see it was a lot more serious. So he was unconscious. He was breathing heavily, unconscious, and sorry, there's a little bit gory, but there was blood oozing from his head. And then it was kind of a surreal hour, 2 hours. I have to say, the kindness of strangers, people just getting off the train at the same time. Then we had about 10 people helping us who I've never met before. I've never met since. I have spoken to them on the phone, who did things like call the ambulance and liaise with the station staff and get trains stopped so more passengers aren't coming, through this only way out of the station. looking after me, going and getting, standing out on the street ready to flag down the ambulance. So just these people were like a well-oiled machine, and just honestly, the kindness of strangers. But it was clear from then that Graham was seriously hurt. Rather than taking him to a local hospital, they took him to a trauma centre, like in London, so a big London hospital that receives trauma cases from all over the country. So a specialist head injury unit. And they said it was one of the worst bleeds they'd ever seen on the brain. So, I mean, they see
Mm.
this all the time, and that he was particularly bad. So, so
So
yeah, that
at
was,
this point, you're in shock completely.
yeah, I'm.
You go into shock. You
You,
you
you are,
you're
yeah, I
just
am in shock. I'm also because I was very much, I had long COVID fatigue. I'm a lot better now, but I was not great then. I on that journey home at one point, we'd left a restaurant which was really noisy. And I was, when we were walking to the station in London, I was actually crying with exhaustion. It was just after 10 o'clock at night. I'd been in a very noisy
oh
environment and I was kind of on
yeah,
my knees.
yeah,
So when he's, lying on the ground and I'm lying with him and just sort of touching him, stroking him, encouraging him, even though he's out, he is not conscious. At the same time, I'm going, how am I going to cope with this? I've got long COVID. I kind of had dreaded having a family emergency that I wouldn't have the energy to deal with, and
yeah.
and the shock. And one of the amazing ladies, one of these ladies I never met before, she insisted I had a friend with me to go in the ambulance. And I rang one of our local friends. By now it's like 11:30 at night. And yeah, one of my friends, Kerry, she came with me and spent the night with me in the hospital. So we're sitting in a side room. He's in the A&E department. They have finally taken him up to the ICU department. And he was unconscious for several weeks. He had facial fractures. The rest of his body wasn't damaged. He hadn't injured his spine or anything like that. But he had a really bad bleed on both sides of of his brain, which is very severe. And yeah, and at that point, it's just so frightening because you don't know what's next. It's hideous, and in brain trauma they cannot predict, they can't give you a prognosis. I mean, people, some
Right,
people have
right.
what feels like a minor concussion, they bang their head and it actually turns out to be really, really serious. And then you can get people like Graham who are out cold for weeks and they make a reasonable recovery. So they can't predict. So it was very
Yeah,
frightening at the time and daunting, and I've got long COVID, and
yeah,
it was,
yeah.
yeah, sort of shock on all levels.
I find shock to be a really interesting thing because it's so protective on the system, and sometimes it gives us a type of superhuman strength temporarily.
Yeah,
But and it also somehow mutes the I don't know, the mind, which would
yeah,
jump into what is this going to look like? What's going to, the worry
yeah,
part of the mind, and just
yeah,
keeps it almost like, okay, this is what we're doing next. But the overwhelm of just what you were dealing with, and to me, I think quickly right away of just the decimation of life as you knew
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And suddenly you're in a completely new, altered universe,
yeah,
and you're just not knowing anything about how to cope with it. And everything is new. Everything is new. And you're doing it in a state of injury, because I think
yeah,
of loss as an injury. You're injured too
yeah. Because
when
I
somebody you love
witnessed
is
all
injured.
this. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you had
I was
witnessed it.
there
And yeah,
with
exactly.
him. The trauma of that. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So deep trauma. And then I think about, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, that just, over time, it's that you had said he lives in a full-time care unit now. Like
yeah,
he does not, he has a very compromised different life, and
yeah,
what his life and health look like today.
yeah. Shall I just give you a summary of that? So if I just give you a
Yeah.
summary, he was unconscious for several weeks in this sort of specialist center. And then once, because he was on all these machines and tracheostomy and, just tubes and wires, and over time that kind of reduced. And then he was gradually breathing for himself. And then after a couple of months, they moved him to a local hospital and he was starting to sort of come round. It isn't like on the movies, somebody wakes up and go, "Oh, I love you." And, and it's not like that. It's a really gradual process where his eyes are open, but like nobody's at home. You can just tell like he's not
Mm,
there or one eye twitches, this sort of
hmm
process of coming out of this coma took weeks. And then in the local, he started to sort of be more out of it and then aware of surroundings. Well, he spent 2 months in our local hospital on the stroke ward. They were amazing as well. And he was so badly affected. So, and again, they can't really give a prognosis, but it was just, it's just horrendous. And he hasn't changed an awful lot, to be honest. So his condition, he is severely cognitively impacted. Well, I remember once when he was in the London hospital, one of the doctors just went through the scans of his brain and goes, "Oh, well, it'll be speech and language and higher reasoning and his right side." And yeah, so Graham's talking is all mangled. He speaks like a mumbo jumbo language. So in his head, he thinks he's saying stuff, and you can pick out words. You can pick out words, very short phrases, but not sentences. So it's very hard. I don't know what he's saying for 90 odd percent of my time with him. And that hasn't changed. So that sort of the engine in the brain that runs that speech has just gone. Because, sometimes with someone's had a stroke, you can relearn, but
hmm
he can't recognize letters or numbers. So it's not a case of, typing something out or writing. He has lost that function. At the time, he couldn't swallow because that sort of swallow reflex had gone, and while he was in hospital. But so he was in London hospital for a few weeks. He was in our local hospital for 2 months, and then he was transferred to a neuro rehab unit where they sort of work. You get more sort of physio and speech therapy and psychological stuff, sort of whatever you need. And the speech therapist there was amazing because the swallowing and eating comes as part of speech therapy. So yeah, he wasn't able to eat or drink the whole time he was in hospital. He was tube fed, and he would pull it out, would go up his nose and out, and he would keep pulling it out, and they'd keep putting it back in, and he was losing weight. And then they put what they call a peg tube into his stomach so that he can then be fed. It looked like a bag of something which looked like oatmeal. I mean, it's not oatmeal, it's sort of nutritionally balanced, but that would be on a drip, and that would sort of be a constant food going into him. So the big victory he did have with the speech therapist was she did get it so that she sort of taught him to swallow again, and he can eat normally now, but his food has to be sort of minced up. It's sort of softer food. So he can't sort of sit and, chop up a steak or piece of chicken and swallow it. So his food is softer and specially prepared. And his drinks also, if he drinks water, say water normally, he coughs and splutters a lot. So there's a choke risk from that. So they put thickener in his food, and it's quite common, if somebody's had a stroke, and sort of,
hmm
your viewers, listeners might be familiar with that if you're nursing someone who's had a stroke. So that was his big victory, to be able to eat normal food, albeit differently prepared, but proper food. And to have drinks. So he has his drinks. So the drink is thickened. So he has like a cup of tea or something with a spoon. It's like more like a
hmm
jelly consistency, and that's safer for him to consume that way. But sorry, go on.
I was going to say again, as I hear you talking, there's the piece about watching someone suffer
Yeah,
and what it does to you. So that's what we're all hearing as you're speaking. That's what's here.
yeah,
I'm feeling on some level this kind of heartbreak. And then there's the complete, again, as I said, decimation of life as you knew it,
yeah,
and the complete sudden loss of your relationship. And not that it, meaning this complete and sudden 360-degree
yeah.
shift
It's
in
gone.
your relationship. It's
Yeah,
gone as you
it's
knew
gone.
it. It's gone.
Yeah, it's
And
gone.
so you're beginning again. And I'm just thinking about the enormous process that was for you, and what that was like, and how you found yourself moving through that.
Well, you kind of realize that you are in grief. So Graham's accident was the end of June. It was about November, so he was in the rehab place. So about, around about 2 years ago, we're recording this in November now. But it sort of hits you. It became clear that he wasn't going to recover, that he wasn't sort of coming back in any way.
Yeah.
It became clear that he really was severely affected and there wasn't much recovery going on with him. And at that point, even the eating and drinking hadn't come back. So there wasn't a busting load of difference. And yeah, because Graham and I, because we met later in life, we used to call each other our honey bunnies. I've got a magazine subscription that comes to Mrs. H Bunny. We never used our own names. It's always, hey, honey, or, and we had little pet names for each other. We were very happy. We felt very blessed to have found each other later in life. We were both single until we were 40. I used to say, we're in our 50s, but we're rookies at marriage.
Yeah.
So we were really happy. We were very tactile. Graham's quite hairy, and I used to call him my big Ted, and I sort of quite like stroking his arm or his back or chest or whatever. So we were very tactile, very loving, probably a bit too sickly with each other sometimes, but we didn't care because we were happy. And all of that has gone. He became ultra sensitive to touch, so that like even showering and stuff like that, the water on his skin, he doesn't tolerate it. They have to sort of do him with washcloths and stuff. His personal hygiene. He needs full on care. He needs, it takes three of them to sort out personal hygiene for him whenever he needs it, several times a day, obviously. So I don't get to touch him anymore. I don't
Mm.
get to
Right.
kiss him. I don't get to hug. I've lost all of that. So I've lost my honey bunny. I've lost this man that he was, and I've lost our marriage. I say that I'm married, but I don't have a marriage. I identify with widows, and I just think it's why, I sort of tuned in to your podcast and listened to your other guests, because I have lost my husband. But also I haven't, because he's not dead, and I don't have the release uh, of death brings also some release, and I don't have that. This
Yes,
is
because
ongoing.
it's so true. It's such a beautiful point because I think of, I really always refer to loss as an injury. It's a
Yeah,
severe, severe injury, and grief is the recovery from that injury.
yeah,
And when there is an actual death, there is some kind of ending that
yeah.
you
There's a
can
finiteness to it,
then
isn't there?
then you can reorganize around that. But here it's
Yeah,
almost like you have an open wound or a bed sore,
yeah,
and you're
yeah,
just constantly having to tend to that wound within your heart.
yeah,
And that is a long and really arduous and difficult process, and particularly with intimate partner loss,
yeah,
because I think of it as like this live wire aspect, how without your person, that was your person for everything. That was your person
yeah,
for physical
yeah,
regulation and
yeah,
touch. That was
yeah,
your person for mirroring. That was your person for backup. That was your person for support. That was your person for discussion, verbal
yeah,
discussion. All of a
yeah,
sudden you're deprived of all of that, but the live wire in you is still looking to plug into that
yeah,
person. And I can imagine how difficult it is to see that person there and subconsciously be going to
yeah,
plug in,
yeah.
and how
I look,
long
yeah.
it takes to sort of train yourself out of that,
It,
and how painful it is every time you go to plug in, because that's sort of the widow piece, the partner
yeah,
loss piece, that's
yeah,
what people deal with in that I don't think everybody understands. That's really a moment to moment painful experience.
yeah. So, yeah, that sort of decoupling uh, is,
Yes.
I mean, it's an ongoing thing. So obviously, in those first few months, there was the shock and the realization that he was gone, our marriage was gone, everything I'd known, our future was gone, and all
Yes.
those everyday things which you've just mentioned, has gone. So, and you're realizing, yeah. I'm in grief. Because because initially you're just coping, and I think once
Yes.
he got to the rehab home, you kind of begin to settle into it because everything is so topsy-turvy on so many levels. So yeah, about 2 years ago, 4 months after his accident, is when I realized, yeah, I'm in grief. He's never coming back in it in any way. I was always so frightened, actually, that, well, would he at some point be sent home for
Yeah.
me to care? And I had long COVID at the time, and caring's hard. When you're caring for someone 24/7, I take my hat off to anybody doing that. It's hard and it's relentless, and there are no days off, and you can't leave the person alone in the house. And I must admit, I was dreading that on many levels because I knew physically I wouldn't be able to do it. For my long COVID recovery, you need a lot of rest. And, I never pushed through. If I was too tired to go and see him, I didn't see him. I had to do what I needed to do for me. Although, I say this, I'm kind of, it sounds a bit weird, but it's kind of, he is so bad that he's not coming home, which on one level is a relief because I'm not caring for him myself. He needs just so much more than that, so many more people to handle him in all kinds of, you know, personal care ways, as well as the sort of therapeutic side. Um, and then, so we go through layers of separation because obviously he has been going through his process. Has he became more conscious? One moment, I'm really sorry. Something's just happened on my computer screen. Microsoft Teams just fired itself up. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. So he
Yeah.
became more, obviously, he's going through his process of realizing what's happened to him because there was a point in his rehab journey where his behavior really changed. And they had tried to have him propped up by several physios, tried to have him up walking. I mean, so he can't weight bear. He's not paralyzed, but he can't weight bear. He hasn't sort of got his legs and everything move, but he hasn't got sort of weight bearing capability. And they had him up very sort of propped up by people and a walking frame and stuff. And I think after that, his behavior changed. Perhaps somewhere in his brain, he realized, oh my God, I'm really bad. Because he's lost a lot of the higher reasoning, some, sort of conscious thoughts. But inside is a really intelligent man because they used to say, they still say in the home that often he just sits and he listens to what's going on and he listens to conversations. So obviously there is a piece of him still there that is this very intelligent man, but he's lost all this sort of executive reasoning and some executive functioning. So over, and it's very hard for me to know where he is because I don't know what he's saying. So our conversations are often yes, no. Are you talking about me? Yes. Are you worried about money? Yes. Are you worried about me? I have to sort of yes, no into a topic to get the gist of what he's saying.
Yeah. And I
It's
think
very
about,
hard, and there hasn't been a
uh,
solution to that. Different things just don't work with him. They're sort of normal. There are different cue
right,
cards, stuff like that, communication charts, but they haven't worked, and they're for more simplistic things like, would you like a cup of tea or an ice cream? Not
right.
here we are in the new state of our marriage.
Not connecting
There's
on
no
that.
cue cards for that.
There's no deep verbal emotional connection. And I,
Yeah,
and I, I do think, of course, there's nonverbal communication in the sense that you know him so well that you can
yeah,
probably tell if he's where he's at on a basic level emotionally, or
yeah.
where, when, if you walk in the room, perhaps, like,
It's
is he
very,
having a good
yeah,
day, is he having a bad day, maybe that piece of the nonverbal,
yeah,
but you're going to plug into that person and try to process what's happening
yeah,
together, and you can't do it with him. And that's a
yeah,
very
yeah,
so crushing and lonely experience. And I think of also the guilt piece, because I hear you saying, like, I feel guilty, but I'm relieved that he's not coming home
yeah,
because I don't think I could manage it.
yeah,
And the guilt is such a stumbling block for so many people. But I notice it sounds like I wonder how you've come to give yourself the permission to take care of yourself during this process in a way that may not, uh, that may take you further away from him sometimes.
Yeah, this is one of the benefits of my long COVID, because I was starting to have therapy around it's actually rebalancing the autonomous nervous system. So I was seeing a therapist, but it wasn't a talking therapy and it wasn't a physical therapy. It was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So I was already starting that process when he had his accident. So the fortuitous thing about that is that I had coping mechanism tools, and I knew there was no pushing through for me, and I knew I was starting to sort of learn breathing exercises to calm myself. And so that ongoing process with that therapist really was so useful, as all of this is just breaking out and just going crazy, that this seismic thing. I was
Mm.
already in a process and had some tools, so that helped me. I practice Buddhism. I've been a Buddhist for 30 odd years, 37, 38 years. So I had a practice which helps you to sort of strengthen yourself for whatever life throws at you, not in terms of removing yourself from life, but whatever it is, we will find a way through it and find a victory in it. So
Mm.
I have that mindset. Just I've been a Buddhist all my adult life. I think and part of my long COVID journey was around self love and self kindness, and I think that has stood me in really good stead. I mean, I knew I wouldn't be able to care for him if he come home. And I suppose, yeah, I have rebuilt my life. On one hand, I'm doing quite well, all things considered, and I have been recovering through my COVID. There are times there's guilt about that. He is 30 miles away because there's not many of these specialist facilities. So now, when he moved to the rehab place, I visited him twice a week. Now I actually only go once a week because it is exhausting, and I am choosing putting my own life back together. You kind of have. If he was nearer, it would be nice to see him more. But would it create value for either of us? I'm not so sure that it would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You're asking
yeah,
like the hard questions, you really are.
yeah,
And the piece about self-compassion, I think of the number one developmental task of grief is expansion of
yeah,
self-compassion. That's the thing that's required of us. And because you had, sounds like because you had gone through
yeah,
your own grief
yeah.
in of your health,
I was grieving a life I
you
had
were
lost prior to
you
that.
were
Yeah,
forced, yeah, you were forced that expansion as a matter of
yeah,
survival, the expansion of self-compassion and self-care and self-kindness. it, it's necessary for
yeah,
survival.
yeah. So that's been a big journey for me. I mean, there have been times when I have felt guilt at maybe not going to see him, but you know, I've had some good friends, and the establishment where he is, they also take good care of me as well. I've built great relationships with their staff.
Yeah.
So stories like, his accident took one life, it took him. But if it took your life as well, that's a double tragedy. So sort of that reasoning that that they tell me all the time, Callie, you have to get on with your life. You
Mm.
it's great you're coming to see him and everything, but you have to live. And I am. And as I've sort of come through long COVID, and my health is so much better now, so I have rebuilt a life for myself. I guess we were both single till we were 40, so I was used to, I spent years living on my own, so I wasn't daunted by that. I'm quite an independent person, so that side of things. I mean, yeah, the first time you go shopping, grocery shopping, and I'm like, oh, it's just me now. What do I want to eat? Those kind of things was,
Yeah.
really strange, because you're also in shock, and my energy's diminished. But yeah, yeah, that sort of that self-compassion. And there are times, I remember a particular time, it was actually when he was still in a hospital, and there were brilliant sort of therapy assistants and nurse in there in the ward where he was. And I remember visiting one day. I was tired. I probably shouldn't have gone. I was too tired, but I went anyway. And he I mean, he was in hospital so long, things like they don't cut your nails in hospital, you know. So eventually, when 2 or 3 months have gone by, I had to attend to, toenails, fingernails, and stuff like that. And I remember I was doing that and I was making a real hash of his fingernails and I'd actually nicked his skin. And this amazing therapy assistant, she was lovely and she came in and she took over and she just finished off and did his nails. And then she seemed to understand more of what he was saying than I was. And then she knew just where he liked a pillow on his chair, where he was hanging his legs off the bed. And I felt
Yeah.
so ineffective and so useless. And I cried for 2 or 3 days. And rationally, that, well, these people are professionals. They are trained to do this and they get to switch off at the end of their shift and go home to their life. And you haven't chose this and there's kind of no way out of it at the moment. So, and I remember seeing my therapist in the aftermath of this experience. And I was just crying. I couldn't stop crying. And she said about, how in talking with her, what was the anecdote to this? And I said, oh, it is love. And she said about it, you are worthy of love. She repackaged that. And even those places, the bits, the critical parts of yourself, or the bits that say, oh, you want to be do this, or shouldn't you have done that? Or, all those bits where we bully ourselves. She said, all of those parts are worthy of love. And that was a turning point. That was one of those sessions when I came out and thought, that is worth all the money I've paid her. You have, I think in any therapy process, every now and then you have a session where you're like, that, I so needed that. And I came home and I wrote on an index card, you are worthy of love. And I put it in my kitchen and it was in, because I wear reading glasses. So I put it in big print so I could see it without my glasses on.
Yeah.
And I put it on like a fruit bowl in the kitchen. So it was there, whatever I was doing, like in the center of our house. And that was one of those real turning point moments, actually, in my own health journey, as well as in dealing
Mm.
with this. You just have to keep giving grace to yourself. I mean, because I was undergoing therapy around the nervous system, I learned about like the fight or flight part of sort of the vagus nerve and dorsal vagal, which is when you're in shutdown. So again, I had learning this and learning about these states. So there were times when, yeah, I couldn't get out of bed for the day and I would let myself be. I was like that you were in dorsal vagal, it's a shutdown, it's a coping mechanism. So that's fine. Stay in bed, get up, have some
Yeah.
toast, go
It's
back to bed. And so I allowed myself to sort of go through whatever I needed to go through. I wasn't working. If I'd been in a job, I don't know, how would I, I don't know, but I wasn't. So I was able to allow myself to be what I needed to be throughout all of
yeah,
it and ongoing, actually. I mean, there's
that's
not so many
beautiful.
days now where I don't get out of bed. It happens occasionally. If we've got sort of assessments coming up for the funding of his care, so because alongside all obviously losing everything we've talked about, losing your lover, losing this grief, there's also a phenomenal amount of financial of admin it's just hideous bureaucracy going on at the same time. We
That's
didn't.
part of the caregiving. That's
Yeah,
part of your caregiving
yeah,
responsibilities, that you may be
yeah,
not responsible for his daily care, but you're responsible
yeah.
for your life situation and
Oh,
his life
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
And that's a huge burden. I think
yeah,
about when you're talking these layers of grief,
yeah.
these
It's
layers of
ongoing.
loss are ongoing. And um, in addition to having the trauma and witness the trauma and having his traumatic health experience, you the loss of an intimate partner is traumatic loss.
Yeah,
So when you're talking about the nervous system being in dorsal,
yeah,
or being in fight, flight, or freeze, or being enervated by something that it doesn't wouldn't normally be enervated
mm,
by, that's all trauma. We're dealing with
mm,
traumatic loss.
yeah,
So this applies to grief, anybody grieving in living
mm,
grief,
yeah,
anybody who's grieving an intimate partner. And the layers for the first 3 years, I think the
yeah. Well, I'm 2 years
layers
in, so
of,
I'm still in this. Yeah,
you are in the middle of this
mm,
process where, as I can hear from your description, it's moment to moment.
yeah,
And some days are better than others, and maybe there's becoming a little more space in
yeah,
between some of the more
yeah,
completely overwhelming moments.
yeah,
But you are still in the middle of it, which is why I feel like it's such a gift for you to be able to talk about the living experience of living
Mm.
grief
Oh, thank
for
you.
people who are in it. So I really appreciate your perspectives.
And it does go in stages. So a year ago, my term was that we were going through an emotional divorce because I could feel him pulling away from me, probably for his own survival. Again, I don't know the details because I don't know what he says. That's the hardest thing. I don't know what he says.
Mhm.
And I realized Christmas last year, leading up to Christmas, it was just the worst time because I could see he was pulling away from me, and I knew that I would have to do the same for my own survival. And we were so happy and close in our marriage. Not without our issues, like any marriage, but we were genuinely we had a strong marriage. And I could tell that I also somehow needed to pull away emotionally from him, or that change in structure. And I can feel it again now. Is another layer now. I'm on Substack. There's someone on Substack, and I read their posts, and they're caring for their wife who's got Alzheimer's. And this gentleman, he writes lovely things, and he writes about how he sees it as two marriages. There was the marriage before, but that has gone, finished, and there's the marriage he has now, and how he, I guess, for order for both of them to survive and rebuild from where they are, he's had to just let go of all of the before. There's no point bringing up photos, this, that, and the other, talking about remember when, because his wife can't. And something about that I thought it's kind of where I'm at, because if I say to Graham, "Oh, do you remember when we went here, went there?" He either can't or he doesn't want to, in his survival mechanism. And I don't know how conscious or
Mhm.
subconscious that is for him,
Mhm.
because yeah, there is just this hard line through our marriage, and what we had has gone. And I'm going through another level of realizing. I sort of come up with this line last week. I'll probably write about it in the next couple of weeks. I have to relinquish our past in order to accept our present. And again, that's just another, it's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
hideous. Where
Yeah.
we're at is so hideously horrific. It was a split second thing all the way back on those steps. And it is, I say to people, it's ongoing. We're in our late 50s. He's just turned 60. He could live another 10, 20 years. He did have some underlying health conditions. And I think, my God, am I going to be going, am I going to be doing this for the next 20 years, driving up the motorway to go see him, doing the accounting of his money that I have to do for our Office of Public Guardian, because we didn't have power of attorney. My huge tip to anybody is get power of attorney with your partner, because I've done it for elderly. My parents, we had it. You think of it,
Mhm.
for the older folk, but you
Yeah.
don't think of it with your other half if you're in a stable marriage or a very stable relationship. Because it was a whole nother level of bureaucracy, and I have to do accounts on his money.
You're saying to people that
Yeah.
you believe that they should get a power of attorney for their intimate partner
Yeah.
before something happens
Yes, because when
as a
something happens, it's too
pre-planning.
late.
Yeah, it's
When
too
when
late,
you
right?
when you need it, it's too late, because
Yep,
then you have to be of
yep,
sound mind. And
yep.
obviously he's not. So that's a number of my friends have, over the last couple of years have done power of attorney. I've now done power of attorney for myself with my brother and my nephew, sort of trusted family people. So if something
Hmm.
it really brings home. If something happens to me, I've recently written what I call the death doc, which is going through all my affairs. Here's my bank accounts. Here's this. Here's this. Here's this. This is what you'll need to
Yeah.
do in my newsletter, my website. And also, if something happened to me, Graham needs to be handed over to somebody, and we
Yep.
don't tend to do that. So, but when something really bad happens, you have to pick up all these pieces, and you have to do it while you're going through, this trauma and this grief. So,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I get angry and like, oh my God, am I going to be doing this for the next 10 or 20 years? Am I going to be doing this when I'm 80? And am I going to be typing in numbers into the government system that's supervising my handling of his money?
It
And
feels like an add to me, it feels like an added insult that during
yeah,
the time, somehow an
yeah,
added insult, and that somehow during the time when you're really pulled to the extent that you can
yeah,
almost barely make it through a day, that
yeah,
somehow you have to manage that at the same
yeah,
time. That just feels so
which,
horrible. I can hear, I can appreciate what you say about the letting go. layer by layer, and the letting
Yeah, it
go
is a
of
layering,
what was, in order to, engage with what is in the present. And I think that also, because you still love him and he's still
I
here and you
do.
still
He's
see
still my
him.
honey bunny. I think of him as my
Yes,
eternal honey
yeah.
bunny. That we've always, got this big connection. But,
Yeah, and that's like
but
managing that at the same time. I mean, I went through a little bit of sort of losing my husband before I lost him, in the sense
yeah,
that he had yeah, he had some dementia, some cancer related dementia, and uh very strong changes in personality. And
yeah,
so
so
how I
hard.
would approach him, so that it was that same sort of process.
Yeah,
When you're watching somebody go, you're losing them bit by bit by bit,
mm,
physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so what I would do, was I would detach from the actual behavior, which may have been really antithetical to who he ever was.
yeah.
And I
Same with
would
Graham.
look, yeah, exactly. And I would look through into his eyes at his essence, and I would love that essence.
Yeah,
And I would see that beyond what was in front of me, because that was the way I could access my love
yeah.
for him and try and transmit that in some nonverbal way, and hope that it was received in some
You just
nonverbal
hope, yeah,
way.
because you can't control
Um,
that, can you? You just
no,
I suppose through anyone in this condition, you can only do your best, and you can only do your best at any point in time with what
yeah,
you know at that point in time, and with what you can do at that point in time.
yeah.
And I've learned
And that's a
another tip.
beautiful,
Yeah,
that's a lesson. I just want to say that's a beautiful
yeah,
lesson in staying in the present moment, because it's so easy to get overwhelmed. The whole situation is
yeah,
completely overwhelming.
yeah,
So when you're in overwhelm, you have to bring yourself back into these small increments of time, and to say, I can only do my best today. I can only
yeah.
take my next best right step for today. Um, but yes, your other tip.
So a couple of tips actually as you're speaking. One is, yeah, staying in the present, because especially in those first few months when it is so unknown with brain injury, which way it could go. And I was really frightened, yeah, of him coming home and how would I cope, and coping with a person who wasn't him anymore, because you kind of realize, well, I could see that he had changed. So I did learn to stay in the present, because the future was really frightening. And a lot of people at that time said to me, "What about going to a support group or something, Cali?" And actually, I didn't want to go, because I didn't want to hear someone's horror story from 6 months or a year down the line. I didn't want to know what was coming to me potentially. I didn't want to hear
Yeah.
someone's story of, oh my God, I've got this problem with the carers and that problem. Like, I couldn't cope with knowing that. So actually, I didn't seek out any sort of support groups at that time, because it's like, no, 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 no. and
Hmm.
and I learned to stay in the present, like, right now, because obviously my financial situation was then awkward because of my own health. I wasn't working. So I learned, today I've got enough money, today I'm okay. And as this time has gone by, I have been okay, and I've been many certainly financial battles over his affairs that I've had to fight, but they have so far come good. So that's one tip, that real
Yeah.
staying in the present. And another thing I learned, and it's perhaps, as we've talked about guilt, when I hear myself say, should I have done this, should I do that, should I have visited, should it, soon as the word should I comes into my head or out my mouth, I know the answer is no. Okay. Because if it's something you can
Hmm.
do, either because you want to
Hmm.
do it, or you can, or you're capable, or it's the right thing to do, you'll do it.
Yeah.
So when you're going, should I, or I should, you're second guessing. There were times, because I couldn't visit him every day in hospital because of my own health. And it's like, should I, well, should I, or should I do this? Even now, should I visit him more frequently than I do? But yeah, so when you hear that phrase in your head, the answer is no.
Yeah.
That
Beautiful.
brings me a lot
I
of
love
peace,
that.
actually, and I catch that, and
Yeah.
and I use that now in my business. I'm sort of resurrecting a coaching business now, and my writing. Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? There's 100 things I could be doing to
Yeah.
market a business and make stuff happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, if it's a should I, then it's like no, not
Hmm.
maybe in the future, but right now, no.
Yeah. And I think about as I hear you talking, I know what I always feel is to have in the moments of overwhelm,
Mm.
which this type of grief and any type of grief is complete overwhelm, that it's really helpful and grounding to have a goal, to have an intention, to
Yeah.
have, which is a guidepost that sort of pulls you forward into a very scary future. But when you described two sort of goals that you had, but one of them was, it came from your spiritual practice of saying, I am, my goal is to strengthen myself for whatever
Yeah.
comes, to make
Yeah.
myself as strong as possible.
Yeah.
um, and then yeah, so having that intention, and then the other intention was, I think it was something about having, I have to, it was about the double tragedy. If I, one life has been
Yeah.
lost, that's
Yeah.
his, but if my life is lost too, then that's a double tragedy.
That's
So
two
I
lives
have
that
to,
have gone.
that's two lives that have gone, so I have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
That's how I pull myself into a scary future. But it's grounding. It's like something you kind of
Yeah.
hang on to as you don't
Yeah.
know what you're doing. And I think that's a beautiful thing you've done for yourself. I wanted to ask you three questions that I always
Yeah.
am
Sure.
asking my guests, and just have you kind of like in one word or sentence, just answer the three questions. The first one is, what was the most challenging thing about your grief? What has been?
I think for me, at that point, I realized I am in grief for a life and a relationship that has gone. When you realize this is the reality, all of that has gone, and I am now grieving. I think that initial, oh, this is grief, was
Mm-hmm.
challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and what is the most important thing you've gained from the experience of living grief, or continue to gain? And not
I
not
think
the
it,
loss, not necessarily the
yeah,
tragedy, but
but the
but your
process.
response to the tragedy, grief as part of your response.
A couple of things. I mean, yeah, that whole giving yourself grace, the self kindness, the self love. That's it's actually a huge benefit, and the fact that I I am really strong, and people have told me over these couple of years, my God, Kelly, you're the strongest person I know. You've been incredible. That I actually have found this strength, and I have had the energy, and I have begun to thrive myself in spite of all of this, which is amazing and is to be
It's a
celebrated,
miracle.
and
It's a
it's
miracle.
fantastic that and very much that's from my Buddhist practice that, we can find happiness no matter what, that your life can strengthen to not just survive but thrive. And and that's an ongoing process with all its ups and downs. But yeah, I am really strong, and I have built and I
You
am
are.
building, a good
Yeah.
life. And people say
Yeah.
when they see me, they always say how well I look. You look amazing. You look radiant. And I think that is that power just coming through. But that begins with self-love and grace and kindness to me.
Yeah. And it's, I can hear the true experience, the true direct experience of
Mm.
empowerment through that. And
Yeah.
to me, that's why I do the work that I do. One of the
Mm.
greatest gifts of the work that I do is because we get access, and through you and sharing
Mm.
it, we get access to the incredible power of human resilience
Mm.
that's innate and inside of all of us.
Yeah.
And it's
And
just,
we all have it. Yeah.
grief is sort of about reaching in there and finding
Yeah.
it, digging around and
Yeah.
pulling, allowing it to emerge. And it wants to emerge during
Yeah.
times of trouble. And it's beautiful how you have helped to pave the way for yours to emerge.
Yeah, you
Um,
definitely. It's amazing what we can do because people say I could never do this, Kelly, but I'm like, well, you would if you had to, because I've had
yeah,
to.
yeah,
That when that night of his accident where I'm on the floor crying, going, I've got long COVID, I can't do this. That wasn't right. I have done it. You know.
yeah, right. That's true. Yeah. So, and then the last question is, what advice would you give to someone, which you've given a lot, but just
Yeah,
one more summary of what
yeah.
advice you might give to someone in living grief?
I think again, the word that comes to mind is acceptance, because I think that's what I'm personally going through at the moment. This process of acceptance, because I can moan about I do have to witness and endure a lot seeing Graham how he is. He lash out, he will hit me. I've got scratches, bruises and stuff, which is, the old him would be horrified to see him doing that
Yeah.
to me. So it is, I do, unfortunately, I am stuck in this situation which it is very hard to witness and endure. So I think it's ongoing acceptance. And as I say, this most sort of recent stage of relinquishing the past to accept the present.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
really crap that it's like, it's just so crap, and I say to people, and I say, this is an horrific tragedy and there is no fixing it. It's not going to get better. There isn't a magic thing, you know,
Yeah.
it can't be fixed.
It's
It
not an
just,
easy answer. Yeah.
it just is,
It's an
you know,
open wound. It's an
and
open
I
wound. And
am
yeah,
in this situation.
yeah. You live with an open wound.
Yeah, and it's
And
ongoing.
the last thing that, right, you don't see any end to it
No,
anytime
I mean,
soon.
yeah, I don't know what his
Who
life
knows? But you
expectancy
don't
is,
know. Yeah. But the other thing that strikes me at the end that, I think we've touched on, but not said out loud, is this idea of detachment in terms of living grief, detachment and not taking things personally. Because when someone is
Mm,
present in body, but
yeah,
not in mind, it can feel very hurtful. Some of the things
yeah,
they might do.
yeah,
Uh, if we judge them from a person who had their full faculties, we would
yeah,
think it was horrific. We'd take it very personally. But it's almost like the detachment from that and looking through that to who the person really is underneath their
yeah,
illness and their
mm,
the ways in which they're compromised is
mm.
such an important thing. Well, um, I really appreciate you being with us today. Like you've been
Oh,
such a beautiful teacher on living grief,
oh, thank you. I hope
unfinished
it's been
loss.
useful for
It's
people because
been incredibly, I hope
it's
it
such a
is.
big thing, you know. I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
some good nuggets have come out for anybody, and I have found it. I've read a couple of memoirs about brain injury. So whatever, if you're watching this today and your situation could be different to mine, but I think, yeah, for me, it's been useful to read or hear other people's. So I've read some memoirs about people coping with brain injury, and that has helped me
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
just they use the same language that I use and feel about this.
Oh,
So
yeah. To not
if
feel alone, to have your village,
yeah,
to have your village of people, which for
yeah,
you also includes the people who live with him every day because they
yeah.
understand what you're
And they're
living
so
with and they
loving.
see it
He's
every day.
yeah, and they're it's
Yeah.
such a loving environment. It's a beautiful place there. Despite
Yeah.
the people in different medical conditions and mental emotional
Yeah.
conditions.
So we can find you on Substack. You are the Gentle Creative, and
Well,
tell us
it's
anything
gentle, yeah,
else.
it's gentle
Gentle,
creative. So
not
if
the
you,
Gentle
yeah,
Creative.
no, it's
Gentle
just gentle
Creative. Yeah.
creative on
Hmm.
Substack, where I write. So I write a mixture of, yeah, the sort of the self-kindness, self-love, sort of gentle encouragement. If you're burnt out and you're going at life too much and you need someone to give you permission to be kinder to yourself, then that's me. And
Yeah.
from time to time, I do write directly about this experience with Graham as well. Not all the time, but sometimes I do. And I think I've got an article brewing around this relinquishing the past for the
Mm,
present.
beautiful. Oh, I can't wait to read it.
So that's coming up. I haven't
Yeah.
started it yet, but I think I will write about that. So yeah, that's the main place to
Amazing.
find me, Gentle Creative.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Callie. It's been a real
Oh,
pleasure.
thank you for having me, and thank you, Leslie, for the
Yeah.
work that you're doing. It's so valuable, all the different facets of your work. So thank you for being there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely. All right.
All right, thank
All
you.
right. Yeah. Bye, everybody. I just want to mention quickly if you well, I'll put Callie's Substack in the show notes. And if you want more information, support on the very particular thing that is intimate partner loss, I'm offering a self study course on intimate partner loss that will be available around the holidays. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep you posted. And until next time, I wish you peace as you tread the waters of grief. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye bye. Thank you.